Thank you very much. Before I begin, I'd just like to again express my great thanks to the Académie des Sciences and also to the Leopoldina for inviting me to this very stimulating meeting. Such a pleasure to be here. So I'm here representing the International Network of Human Rights Network of Academies and Scholarly Societies that's been mentioned a few times this morning. And this is a network of academies from around the world with a shared interest in science and human rights. We have now around 90 national academies that have participated in our activities. And our work is governed by an executive committee composed of 12 academy members, including Monsieur Brazin to my right. As Monsieur Brazin mentioned, this network was created around a quarter of a century ago by 3 Nobel laureates in the sciences, along with an international human rights lawyer, for a few purposes, primarily to defend the fundamental rights of scientific colleagues subjected to human rights abuses worldwide, also to help protect academic freedom of expression and academic freedom more broadly, and also to promote international scientific collaboration and cooperation. So, in thinking about this topic of this panel, science, education, and human rights, you can imagine how key these issues are to our work. They really lie at the heart of our work in a number of ways. And since I just have a few minutes, I'll just highlight very briefly for you right now some key aspects of, some key ways in which our work intersects with science, education, and human rights. The first, of course, is that a large part of our work, the majority of our work, relates to responding to attacks against higher education. And primarily, we come at that through assistance for individual scholars under threat. So as mentioned today, that we've worked on, our network has worked on hundreds of cases over the years involving not only, but including researchers within the higher education context. That includes anthropologists, political scientists, climate scientists, statisticians, and others who have come under threat, subjected to human rights abuses, because their research, their academic work has been considered threatening to their governments in some way. And so in many cases, we support colleagues who have been targeted as a result of their specific research projects. But we also work in support of individuals, scientific colleagues, who are targeted really because they're seen as promoting critical thought and critical discourse. And so this happens at the individual level, and this is the basis for our casework. But we're also involved. Sometimes these attacks happen at a more of a mass level. For instance, situations where police and military forces may enter onto university campuses and begin violent attacks. These are also situations in which we would speak out. And I'm happy to talk more, at length later about the tools that we use to promote human rights in these circumstances. They really range. There's a wide range, from letters of appeal to statements of our executive committee, occasionally country visits, submissions to UN human rights complaint bodies. But the key point that I want to make is that in performing this role, we are seeking, of course, to help the individuals themselves and colleagues in need and their families. But we also, when we express concern, when we speak out about violations of the right to freedom of opinion and expression, the right to freedom of movement, the right to freedom to associate with others, we are reaffirming the principles that underlie, some basic principles that underlie scientific research and progress, and also, particularly relevant for the purpose of this panel, values which are relevant for higher education as well. So this is sort of one big chunk of our work which relates to higher science education and human rights. I should mention that academies within our network, it's a loose international consortium. So in some cases we act as a group, but often academies act at their own discretion. And so I want to point out another way in which many academies within our network are involved in issues related to human rights and science education. And that is through their efforts, the efforts of many academies, to try to help address challenges faced by colleagues fleeing human rights, conflict and human rights abuse. So, exploring ways to help students, displaced students and scholars. And our academies and academy members have done that in many different ways. Some have held expert convenings to discuss how the scientific community can become involved in addressing these issues. The Leopoldina and the Slovenian Academy, I know, held an expert meeting about that a couple of years ago. Also, many academies are involved in collaborations with non-governmental organizations that provide academic fellowships and placements for students and scholars, so working together to try to find academic homes for displaced colleagues. Really, I could go on and on. We have, an academy that's helped arrange medical services for refugees who've come to their countries in need of assistance. And at the individual level, many academy members have also hosted displaced scientists in their own universities. So, again, it comes to the question, why are we involved in this effort? Certainly we're involved in this effort out of a sense of common humanity and a desire to help. But again, there is a strong connection with higher education there, because in providing these forms of support and assistance, we're hoping to strengthen the global higher education community, primarily by making sure that the remarkable talents of many of these individuals are not wasted, but also to ensure that if and when some individuals do choose to return to their homes, that they're able to contribute to building and strengthening higher education communities within their home countries. So this is a sort of second area, but the final issue that I want to mention quickly, where academies have been involved in issues related to science education and human rights, is a bit maybe more abstract or a bit broader, and that is many academies within our network are involved in helping in exploring issues related to the relevance of science for human rights and the relevance of human rights for science, and involved in raising public awareness about these issues. And just to make that a bit more concrete, I'll just give you an example from my own country, from the United States. So of course, many people will probably be aware of the situation in the United States regarding separation of children and families at the southern border of the U.S. And this has caused a lot of problems within my country, but I think it has very much helped in framing this as a human rights issue, that the U.S. National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, and many other scientific societies and professional associations have provided input on the mental health consequences for children of separating them from their families, the trauma that results. So this is, for me, just only one example of a situation where science can be used in the furtherance of human rights. But, sort of more generally, what I think is very exciting to see is that there are many academies within our network and surely elsewhere who are really making an effort to think about, in this globalizing, this changing world, how do we think about human rights? How does it relate to science and technology? And that runs the gamut from holding meetings and doing research on issues like climate change and human rights to, for instance, artificial intelligence and machine learning on human rights. And I think this is quite exciting. There's a lot of work that's being done, but I might just conclude by saying I think one thing that I've seen, I mean, I'm not a scientist, I'm a human rights lawyer, so I think I kind of sort of can see, I speak to both sides, and what I notice often is that for all the wonderful work that's being done, there's often still a lot of continued misunderstanding. And in talks that we have with, because our network has many contacts within the human rights community, and talking with people within, experts within the human rights community, and also within the scientific community, we often hear people saying, we don't speak the same language. You know, it's difficult. We realize it would be useful to get the help of a computer engineer on this problem, but we don't even know how to begin to talk about this. So I think, really this presents an opportunity. It's part of the reason why I think meetings like this are so wonderful, because it helps in bringing these communities together, helps in talking about possible areas of collaboration. But I think it would be also useful to think more about ways to bring the scientific and human rights communities together, possibly in the context of higher education in STEM. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Are there questions or remarks to Rebecca's presentation of, please, yeah.
Je vais parler en français. Merci madame, enfin une femme. Enfin non, il y a eu madame aussi, mais disons que c'est pas si courant que ça. Donc je suis fière pour vous et fière pour moi. Merci madame. Je voudrais vous poser une question qui est presque un peu con, basique. Mais madame, vous pouvez me donner un ou deux exemples? Il y a beaucoup de scientifiques torturés, persécutés dans le monde, beaucoup. Parce qu'en Europe, sauf erreur de ma part, il n'y en a pas. Aux États-Unis, sauf erreur de ma part, il n'y en a pas. Alors, il y en a beaucoup en Afrique et en Asie. Merci, madame.
Thank you for your question. Because of the way that you initiated your question, a particular case came to mind that I want to mention of a woman, a female scientist actually. It's a female scientist who's has Iranian-Canadian, both Iranian and Canadian citizenship. She was working, she is working in higher education in Canada. She's an anthropologist, so scientist, went to Iran on a visit and was doing research on women's political participation. She was arrested, she was held in prison under terrible conditions, and she was told by her guards that she was accused of dabbling in feminism. Yeah, so there was really an outpouring of support for this woman. Her name is Homa Hudvar, and eventually she was, including from our network, but certainly not only, and she was eventually released in prison. So there is one question, or one example. I mean, in my country, many people may be familiar with the case of Wen-Ho Lee, physicist Wen-Ho Lee, several years ago, many years ago now, but a quite famous case, who was a physicist who was accused of essentially espionage, and the case against him, ultimately sort of collapsed with the judge, in his case, apologizing for his treatment by U.S. government officials. So certainly, I mean, I can tell you that right now we're following around 80 cases involving scientists all around the world. And sometimes, just to conclude quickly, sometimes they're targeted, as I say, specifically for their research. And sometimes it's because they are seen as, maybe leaders within society or influencers, and they're targeted to send a message about the consequences of dissent. Thank you.
Okay, please. It's your turn.
Merci beaucoup, Rebecca, pour votre présentation. J'aimerais prolonger un peu la réponse que vous venez de faire. D'abord, au mois d'avril-mai dernier, en France, à Paris, l'école des hautes études en sciences sociales, donc des scientifiques, sciences de l'homme, sciences sociales, a organisé une rencontre sur les violences extrêmes, et à l'occasion de cette rencontre a été mise en évidence les dangers que courent un certain nombre de scientifiques des sciences sociales lorsqu'ils sont sur des terrains d'intervention. Ils font des études de terrain, disent-ils, et ils essayaient de voir comment on pouvait les aider. Ce qui montre qu'il y a certainement place pour des rapports plus étroits entre ce que fait le domaine scientifique à l'état pur et ce que font les sciences de l'homme et les sciences sociales. Et la question que je voulais vous poser, c'est quels sont, lorsque un scientifique fait l'objet de persécution ou plus simplement est arrêté, quels sont vos modes d'intervention? Comment est-ce que vous lui venez en aide? Est-ce que c'est par des contacts avec les autorités locales, directes de ce réseau international? Est-ce que c'est en mandatant un avocat local? Est-ce que c'est en mandatant un avocat du pays d'origine de ce scientifique? Comment, si c'est possible de nous le dire, comment est-ce que vous intervenez? Quelles sont les formes que peut prendre ce soutien?
Thank you for your question. I think there are many possibilities, and as you might imagine, it depends on the circumstances of the case. So, so that could be, within our particular network, we share information with academies. And so the tools, as I mentioned, that we use within our network are, our secretariat will notify academies and academy members around the world of urgent cases, we believe, of human rights abuse. And there's a process for sending letters of appeal. But also we encourage the people with the academies with which we're in touch to approach their officials within their foreign ministries about the cases, who are officials who are dealing with those particular regions. We encourage them to reach out to ambassadors. We in the United States have had some success with meetings with embassy officials and with our own State Department, just to put pressure on a case. Sometimes approaching regional bodies can help, especially actors that deal with human rights within the Council of Europe, for instance, in Europe has been helpful to us in the past. We also make great use of UN human rights complaint bodies, particularly special rapporteurs on the right to freedom from torture and the right to freedom of expression have sometimes been very helpful in drawing attention to a case. Of course, this begs the question, how does one learn about such cases? And so I would say certainly through us for academies, but there are also other organizations that provide information about cases and suggestions for action. I might mention a couple that make their work public. One is the Committee of Concerned Scientists in the United States. Our work is within academies. Their work is private and on the internet, public and on the internet, as well as Scholars at Risk is another one that also has a broader mandate because it deals with scholars in all fields.
Okay.
Et globalement, vous obtenez satisfaction? Globalement, il ne s'agit pas de faire des statistiques, mais les interventions, les outils que vous utilisez vous permettent d'améliorer la situation du scientifique concerné, même si tout est affaire d'espèce, bien sûr.
So I've been doing a lot of thinking about how we think about success in this area, and you know, I think there's a tendency on the part of many people, I spoke a bit about this yesterday, to think in terms of release from prison, right? That's what success is. And certainly that's an element of success, but a lot of, I mean, we have such a range of people that we support. Some are facing criminal charges, others are, you know, under travel bans. So, you know, some are in prison. And so in that sense, success would mean different things in different contexts. And yes, so for instance, yesterday we were looking at the activities of our network in the past couple of years, and there were dozens of situations where there have been significant positive impacts, including release from prison in some cases and the termination of criminal proceedings. And you know, cause and effect, of course, is so difficult to talk about in this context, especially when many actors are involved. But we're in close touch with families of our colleagues, and to a large extent, we rely on them to give us feedback about what they think is useful and not. And we do continually hear that the support of the international community, including scientific colleagues, really makes a difference. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Please.
Vous avez dit, madame, il n'y a pas de cas de persécution en Europe, de scientifiques en Europe. La situation est plus complexe. Il est vrai qu'au cours des dernières années, nos interventions ont concerné majoritairement des pays comme la Turquie, l'Iran, la Chine, etc. Mais il y a des situations plus complexes à décrire. Par exemple, un pédiatre suédois d'origine iranienne retourne visiter sa famille. L'Iran ne reconnaît pas la double nationalité. Il est immédiatement accusé absurdement d'espionnage. Cet été, un mathématicien français, enfin, professeur à Lyon, retourne rendre visite à sa famille, est arrêté dans les mêmes conditions absurdes. Donc vous voyez, c'est un peu difficile de séparer et dire en Europe, pas de problème. Je crois que nous avons des problèmes.